Welcome back to another episode of the podcast.
Hi.
How's
I didn't want to cut you off.
How's everyone doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Right? Today's been a day. There's two people that do my role. I am one of them, and the other girl was off today, and so I was doing all of our work, and it was a lot. I needed something with a kick to bring me through today.
So for the record, a kick for her is a Sprite.
A McDonald's Sprite.
A McDonald's Sprite, but still a Sprite.
I do what I can with what I have.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Times is hard.
Wait, did you go to McDonald's and just get a Sprite?
Yes. I went solely for the purpose of getting me a Sprite.
Oh, that's
I
great.
went to the drive-thru. She goes, "Hey, we're using the mobile app." And I was like, "Nah, let me get a medium Sprite. That's it." And she goes, "Is that all?" And I was like, "Yes."
And I realized, like, you've done it before coming here. And it's just
Absolutely. One of my go-tos is a Sprite and their chocolate chip cookies.
Oh, there you go.
You'll notice specific times that I do it. It's very, I was going to say periodical.
I was going to say, go back and watch all of our episodes and tell us if you can tell.
Is there a pattern?
Like,
is there a trend?
Is there a trend for when she only...
Do you remember when we first started and I would have a different Starbucks drink every time?
Yeah.
What
and then eventually it just became the same one because that was all I knew you liked. I was like, all right, cool. That's what you get. Good times.
Avy, how we doing? Doing all right? Cool. Okay. Farah gave a thumbs up.
They look so bored.
Should we include them in the episode?
I think we should.
I'm down.
All right.
I love perspectives.
They have a microphone.
They have a mic, right? All right. Stay tuned. I might call on you. All right, so we are continuing our series with the parables. Yep. Today we're going to be talking about the unmerciful servant, and we will be looking at Matthew chapter 18. Similar to the last parable, this one is a bit lengthier. It's about 14 verses. I'm going to kind of summarize it a bit. So basically, in this parable, there is a king.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a debt to collect.
Mm-hmm.
So he calls the servant. He's like, "Hey, where's my money at?" Servant's like, "I don't got it."
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "All right, I'm going to sell your whole family off and I'm going to make my money back." And then, sorry. Let me backtrack.
Okay.
What brought this parable upon us? So I'm going to read the first couple of verses, actually. So then Peter came to him, being Jesus, and asked, "Lord, how often should I forgive someone who sins against me? 7 times? No, not 7 times, Jesus replied, but 70 times 7. Therefore, the kingdom of heaven can be compared..." And then he goes into the parable. So 70 times 7 times you should forgive, right? Which is 490 times.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time we were trying to remember if it was 70 times 7 times a day, and it was not. So in general, as a person has 490 strikes, and then I don't make the rules after that. Okay, so king has a debt to collect. Servant doesn't have the money. So he's like, "All right, I'm going to sell your whole family off to pay off the debt." But the servant was like, "Sir, please don't do this. Just give me some time and I'll pay it off." And so the king was like, I felt bad for him. He was like pitying him. He was like, "You know what? I'm going to have mercy on you." And so he released him, and he was like, "You know what? You don't even have to pay me back. It's fine. I forgive you."
Whoa.
Crazy. He went from selling off his whole family to be
like,
"You know what? Forget about it."
That was a big change of heart there.
And then, so he's released. And then this servant then had a debt to collect from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And that person was like, "I don't have it. Just give me some more time. We'll get it." But he was like, "No, I'm not going to do that. Arrest him. Take him away. Beat him up." And so he put him in prison until the debt could be, paid off. And then, so the other servants were like, that's crazy because didn't the king just forgive you of all your debt? So they were like very upset with him, and they went to the king and they outed him. They snitched, and they were like, and then the king called him back, and he was like, he says, "You evil servant, I forgave you of that tremendous debt because you pleaded with me. Shouldn't you have mercy on your fellow servant, just as I had mercy on you?" And then the king sent the man to prison. He was like, "Now beat him up," until he paid his debt. And then Jesus closes this parable by saying, "That's what my heavenly Father will do to you if you refuse to forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart." So if you don't forgive them, God's going to beat you up. Anyway, let's break this parable down. Let's get into it. So there are three main characters in this, right? There's the king, there's servant 1 and servant 2. I think it's fair to say the king is representative of God. Servant 1 is us. Servant 2 is anyone that may owe us things. Right? Cool? We following? All right. So, as someone that is owed a debt, the king was, doing what he's supposed to do, doing as he should, and, trying to collect his debts. Servant 1 now may have still been doing what he was supposed to have done, but was not able to pay off the debt.
Okay.
Right? And so the king, being the one that owes things, is like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get my stuff back regardless. So I'm going to sell you out. I'm coming up with my own solution since you weren't able to do it. Right? I don't think a lot of us would do the same thing in the same way now, but I feel like the principle carries over.
Yeah.
Right? And yet, the king decides to show him mercy. Have you ever been in a situation where it was like someone owed you something, like something like this, and like they didn't have all of it back or whatever, and they were like pleading with you to forgive them or to give them more time and stuff?
I don't think I've ever loaned someone or like given someone so much of something that it's like I needed them to pay me back. I don't think I've ever really been in that situation. Like there's probably, and maybe I should have collected on some like there is one person I know I collected on just because he was just like never paying for stuff, and I was like, dude, you need to pay me back on this one. But and even then I did it more as a joke than anything else, because moving on, I don't think I've ever, if I had to cover him for something, I don't think I've ever asked him to pay me back. Yeah, I've never been like that. That's why I think it's the NLT version. It says like servant 1 owed the king like $1 million, right? Which I don't think is like entirely accurate to how much gold shekels or silver coins Jesus probably originally told the story in. But I get the point of it was just such an
Exorbitant?
yes, amount of money. Um, so yeah, I don't think I've really been in that position. Have you?
Yes. Not in that like I needed the money back so like expeditiously or anything, but I think it's more of principle for me. But there are like with my friends and stuff, we won't really ask each other for it back because we know if you got it this time, I got it next time, and like that kind of evens out and whatever. But there was a time period where I was in like 3 weddings as like bridal party, and so for like
I like the fact you have to clarify that, just in case someone thinks
I was
you've
not
been through like
wedded.
3 marriages already.
No.
I was in 3 weddings, not my own.
So a lot of times you have like the bachelorette and the bachelor, like the events and dinners and whatever. And so I'm very quick to like just put my card and be like, all right, y'all just pay me back because it's easier, right? And so for one of these events, this one girl owed me money and she would keep ducking me. And it wasn't like a crazy amount of money. I think it was like $75 or something. It wasn't it was literally just, why are you like, like,
It's the principle of it.
yeah. And so I hit up the bride, which I was like, hey girl, hate to do this to you in this very stressful time of being so close to your wedding, but you need to get your girl in check. And I was like, I don't care where this money comes from, but I need it to come from her to me in some way, shape, or form. And I was like, matter
Or
of
you're gonna
fact,
sell her whole family.
matter of fact, I don't even, at this point, I don't even need the money. I just need her to respond to me and tell me why she can't pay me back.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because we're all adults, legally. So I need you to be an adult and handle the situation. And like, she was ducking like the bride too. And I was like, my friend, you realize we're all going to be in this wedding in 2 weeks.
Maybe she wasn't gonna show up.
She did show up. At the end of the day, I got some of my money back.
Did you say some?
Yeah.
You didn't even get the full 75?
No, because the bride was sending it to me, and I was like, girl, don't even. And she just sent me back some of it. It was more of like a consolation type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. You see, I think I would have been more forgiving had she like explained the situation to me, right? But in this case, she didn't. And so I'm not going to say I don't think I was unjustified.
No,
I don't think I did anything wrong.
Well, no, I mean, realistically, if you pay for someone and the agreement is, hey, we're gonna pay you back, you gotta pay them back. Like that's just what it is. Like I don't, if you say you're gonna do something, you gotta do it. Like that's it. So
and mind you, as I was planning all these things, I was keeping everyone's budget in mind. And mind you, everyone has different budgets.
Mm-hmm.
So the honestly, the money wasn't even just for the money; it was for the mental anguish that I was put through. But we're fine. We push, we move on. But yeah, okay. So that doesn't really have much to say for this situation because the king forgave him and his debts.
Did you forgive the girl?
I have forgiven her.
All right. Well, there you go. Connection made.
And I also have never crossed her since then. We've never crossed paths.
Well, are you still friends with the bride?
Yeah.
Okay.
Family, really.
Oh, never.
But yeah, and like, cause like, I felt bad because like the bride was like, I don't know why she does this, and I was like, this is your friend. Anyway. Okay.
I have so many comments, but we're gonna get so off topic. Let's continue.
Okay, so I think I did end up showing her grace, and that I didn't chase her down and demand my money from her.
Sure.
I don't think I would have chased her down. How did I not show her grace?
You reached out to her friends to be like, yo, I need my money.
Well, not in those words.
I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah. It was more so like, what's up with your girl? She owes me money. It wasn't like a shakedown.
The lack of a shakedown does not equate to grace. Let me put it that way.
I think me showing her grace was me dropping it.
Okay, yeah, all right.
And then telling the bride to be like, "Hey, you don't have to pay me back her money." Even though this is your
realistically, I
friend
think the bride might have shown grace by paying her debt to you.
Oh, she did.
So
I agree.
Okay.
I think I definitely could have been more gracious.
Okay,
in the situation.
Yeah, definitely.
But I don't think I was completely ungracious.
You weren't like the king trying to sell her family.
No. I'm just saying, if you speak. You're so vocal until now. Anyway. So.
Yes.
Let's say she was owed a debt.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think she would have shown the same grace as the king did?
I don't think I would have been able to find her. I hope she would have shown I hope she would have been more gracious than you were. No, I mean, look, I think when someone is willing to do that for you, to turn around and not do it to someone else is
Mhm.
definitely at least suspicious, right? Um, and the only reason I say it is just because when it's money, right? Like let's say, you know, it wasn't 75, it was something more,
Mhm.
right? That you had paid, like if you guys were like for whatever, we're staying at like a hotel or something, and you
Mhm.
booked the hotel for everyone on your card, and now you have like a huge bill for the hotel,
Yeah.
right? Part of it is it's not even that you want to badger her for the money. It's, well, I have a debt I have to pay now
Mhm.
in my credit card bill, so I need that money, just to pay that, right?
Yeah.
So like no credit card company is going, hey, we're going to be super gracious to you and just forgive
Yeah.
all your debt, right? There's that aspect, but I do think to a certain extent when it comes to like the sort of, I want to say maybe trivial in value kind of things, right? Maybe the thing itself isn't trivial, but the monetary value might be.
Yeah.
I think it is interesting to see how people can be somewhat unmerciful, ungracious, um, towards the person that owes them. Yeah,
I think um one of the things that I have also had to like remind myself sometimes in retrospect or whatever is that like the amount of times that like God has forgiven me, right? And it's not like I've like done something crazy like killed someone or anything, but like you sin, you fall short, you make mistakes and whatever, and still God forgives you for it, and like you move on and you try to be better and whatever. But like life happens, sometimes you slip up and whatever, and yet God still forgives you. And so some of these things, like you said, might seem very trivial, but a sin is a sin, a debt is a debt. And so if God can kind of forgive me all these times, then why can I not in turn have that same grace towards other people?
yeah,
Especially knowing that like my justification for my thing is that I'm a human and I make mistakes. But yet I can't extend that same grace and that same leniency to someone else that is also a human that also makes mistakes.
definitely. I think I think it's I think a lot of times when it comes to our relationship with God, we have very short memories, right? In the sense of God can show us grace in the morning, and by the afternoon, we have forgotten what He has done for us, and we are totally different people to the people we interact with, right? Um, and I think that, I mean, that's what happens here with the servant, right? The king shows him so much mercy and grace,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's the other people who are like, that's messed up. Like, look at what the king just did for him, and now he's doing this, right? Um, even with, like, I know in some of my interactions with people, um, and I think I've been a little, um, I've been somewhat like careful where I don't forget that, oh, you know what? There was a time when I had an anger issue, right? And I had like a short fuse. And sometimes, oh, this person has a short fuse too. And it's easy to criticize that, but look at where God has taken me from that. And I'm pretty sure I still have a relatively short fuse, but, and you knowing me, there are
It's definitely
times,
better than it has
yeah.
been.
Like I was talking to someone about some things that happened recently, and he laughed and goes, he's like, I'm amazed you didn't say what you really wanted to say to that person. And I started cracking up because I was like, oh, there's so much I wanted to say, but I didn't. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of proud of myself for not
Yeah.
like lashing out, right? And I think that's one of the things where it's like, okay, I have to be able now to show it. It's showing the grace that I think sometimes I wish I was afforded,
Hmm.
right, to people, right? Which I think is sometimes really hard because it's like you can even be somewhat resentful because like, well, no one
Showed me.
no one showed me
Yeah.
grace when this happened, right? I just got thrown under the bus and that was it, right? And oh, well, you did X, Y, and Z and now you have to pay for it, right? So it is an interesting thing when you've grown closer to God, you've seen and I think tasted what his grace can do in your life. And now when you interact with others, it's I think now it's a lot more of a like in the foreground of my interactions with people of oh, you know what? I used to be I used to respond to things that way. I can't respond to it that way anymore.
Hmm.
Right? And it was even interesting cuz like there was some other stuff going on with like some other friends outside of that thing that we're referencing and one of my friends she goes like she's like, you see, I'm not crazy. Like, look at how this other person in our friend group is talking to me and texting me and this and that. And there was a part of me when I was like, you know what? There was a time when I would have read a lot of tone and things into this that I have no way to prove are there
Hmm.
in these messages, right? It is easy to say this person is tone is weird, and there are some things that were said that were weird, but it's like I felt a lot of time I was trying to tell my friend like, hey, instead of reading into all these messages, why don't you set up a conversation with this person so there's no mistake, right? Maybe you're right. Maybe all this negative tone and stuff is in the message and it's there, right? Or maybe it's getting lost in translation, right? Um, there's I forgot what sketch show, but they do a thing where like they're like text like two friends are like texting each other, and one guy's like, "Hey, are we still meeting tonight?" And the other guy's like, "Sure, if you want to." Right? Like no big deal.
Hmm.
And the other guy's reading like, "If I want to, what do you mean if I want to? We made these plans a week ago and blah blah blah." Right? And it's like 30 seconds of the other guy's just like super chill, and like when they meet up, the guy walks in with like a baseball bat ready to like fight him because that's where like in his head he left off the conversation, and the guy's like, "You know I love baseball, and you brought me a baseball bat, right?" And the guy's like, "Oh, you're not? Yeah, this is your favorite." It's like one of those things where we have to be careful how we mm, treat people.
Unrelated. But
Sure.
if you want to is not an invitation. Yeah, you can come if you want to. That is not an invitation. That has nothing to do with our conversation, but I just need to get that out there.
Who hurt you?
So many. But like I don't understand when people are like, "Yeah, come if you want to. Like we're doing this thing." That's not an invitation. Anyway,
At least you got that much.
well, can't really speak to that. Okay. Mercy.
Okay.
Showing them mercy. Um so going back to what you were saying about like after you've grown and you've changed, then you've then shown grace to people that you've seen like are
Yes.
working through things or whatever. I feel like that showing them mercy has one shown how much you have changed, but it also gives them room to grow. Because if you were to do the same thing and like bite their head off for saying something or whatever, where is your growth as a person, right? And then it's also like then they're going to be stuck in that same loop of when they do grow, when they do change. No one gave me grace, so why should I give them grace? And that's just not a healthy cycle to be in altogether. I think it's kind of like contradictory to like what we're called to do in general, right? We're called to love. We're called to show, spread the gospel, to show God's love and grace that He's had on our lives, right? And if we are constantly in that cycle of like, oh, they never did this for me, so why should I do this for them? You're kind of doing the exact opposite, right? He literally says that if someone slaps you, right, give, bare your other cheek, right? You were gonna say.
Um, yeah, I think I lost my thought,
Pull to me.
and we'll just move on.
Okay. So, what do we learn about forgiveness in this parable? And I need more than just to do it.
No, I think we learned that forgiveness is extremely important to our faith, right? Um, you see here the king's, or God, his attitude towards the debt that's owed, and you see his ability to have sympathy for us, or for the servant, whichever, and then go, hey, you know what? I am going to forgive you. And there then becomes sort of an expectation that we will learn to forgive others. And I think a lot of times as believers, we don't know, and I don't know if expectation is the right word, but I think a lot of times we don't realize that part of our call as believers is to forgive,
Mhm.
right? And
It's literally, it's the Lord's Prayer, right? Forgive us
yeah,
as we should forgive our debtors.
but I think okay, going back to the example you had with the bridal party and stuff,
Mhm.
right? That bridesmaids, right? You forgave $75, right? And I'm gonna assume forgiving $75 for you was not a big deal. You had it, cool. I think for us as believers, right? The issue is when it's way more than $75, right? And the NLT wrote it as $1,000,000. But when is it about forgiving someone who has hurt you, right? Who has traumatized you,
Mm.
right? Because we're still called to forgive, right? It's interesting because Peter's question that prompts this parable is, um, how many times should we forgive someone, right? Which is sort of a question to how many times do we forgive someone that just habitually does us wrong,
Mhm.
right? And Jesus sort of gives this number, which is not meant to be taken literally. He's just figuratively saying, keep forgiving them, right? But the question is, what do you do when someone does something to you that is so bad that it really does mess you up, right?
Mhm.
Because it is easy to say from the outside looking in, you have to forgive, right? But when you're in those situations,
Mhm.
it's not easy to forgive,
Oh,
right?
definitely.
And yeah, I don't know if you have any.
I was gonna say, when you are in those situations, it's easier to act on the hurt than it is to kind of act on like, do you know what? They did me wrong. I'm gonna forgive them. I'm gonna move on from it. But I think all in all, it's a process,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, I don't think you're in the wrong if you don't forgive someone right away.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it is important to process your feelings and your thoughts before you make any action. I think at the end of the day, you have to forgive them, right? That's what we're called to do. It's the right thing to do because you also don't want to be holding on to it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the process to do that is not always linear. And it is not always the same for everyone, especially depending on the situation that you're in. But at the end of the day, it is like, because it's easy to forgive someone if they just like a live omission or something, like something little.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously depending on what that omission is, but like if it's something little, it's easy to forgive them. But when it's something that is like an actual hurt, then I think that's where you're
And
tested.
yeah, and even to that, I think everyone sort of has their own
Like threshold.
boundary, yeah, of what they can forgive right away and what they can't.
Mhm.
And for the most part, I don't think we even think about it until someone
Until it
crosses
happens.
that
Yeah.
line with us. And then we're like, oh, I'm not going to forgive this right now. Right? And I think even with that, right, with forgiveness being a process, we sometimes have to be careful that it's not I don't want to forgive you right now or versus I can't,
Mhm.
right? Because I think sometimes our hurt can turn into anger, and out of anger, we can go, oh, I'm not going to forgive you for this,
Yeah.
right? And I think sometimes we think, I've seen people's, I've seen people use forgiveness as a weapon
Oh.
against the perpetrator, right? And that is also wrong, right? It's one thing if you haven't processed what's happened and come to a place where you can say, hey, I forgive you of this. That's different from just saying, I don't want to process what has happened.
Yeah.
I will not forgive you because I am so angry, right? And for some people that might also just be the first stage of processing things.
Yeah,
I'm
that's what I
not
was just
like,
saying. Just because I'm saying
yeah,
it in this moment doesn't mean I
but
won't
I've
eventually.
also seen people just hold on
Yeah.
to, I am never going to forgive this person, right? And um, when you do that, you just indefinitely pause your own healing.
I think I can't remember where when I like heard this analogy, but it's like if you get pricked by like a thorn, right? Like a rose thorn or
Mm-hmm.
something, and the thorn stays on you, right?
Mm-hmm.
By it was I can't remember the like exact parallel, but it was basically like not forgiving them is keeping the thorn, but like they're still moving on and living their lives, but you're holding on to that hurt.
Okay.
I don't remember it, but I feel like that kind of
Okay.
works in the situation. Um, but yeah, at the end of the day, process your feelings, process your emotions. Um, if you can't forgive them in this moment, then that doesn't mean that you are never like you never should forgive them. It is important to forgive. God has forgiven you. God continues to forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I do think that sometimes we have to, we there is the scripture that says, by his stripes we're healed,
yep.
right? And I think that, and I'm pretty sure we've spoken about this on the podcast, where my personal belief on that scripture is that that doesn't just apply to physical ailments,
Yep.
right? I know we quote it when someone is physically sick, but I do believe that God is able to heal anything. And I think sometimes when we have gone through, and there are people who, and I don't want to belittle what they've gone through, have gone through very horrific things at the hands of another person or a group of people. But I do believe that by experiencing God's grace and by experiencing God, we can come to a place in which we can genuinely forgive the perpetrators or perpetrator and move forward because of God, not because of our own something we've done, but because of what God is doing in our lives.
Do you know what's funny?
No.
Last episode, you had an experience that directly correlated with what we were talking
Mm-hmm.
about. This episode,
Mm-hmm.
why'd you say it like that?
Oh, because I knew this as I was like finishing up all the notes and stuff for the episodes. I realized the parallels. But yes, continue.
Where I had a situation where like a friend and I have had repeated conversations about certain things, but yet it still remained an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And so recently, or further along after the final conversation we've had about it, it came up again. And I was like, all right, I'm done here because things were said and it was not a good situation. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to be an adult and I'm going to remove myself from the situation. But it's still like, you still have to work on processing the emotion and like, therefore going forward and forgiving them as well.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where I'm at in this process. I'm pretty sure I'm almost there. We're almost there.
So
But it
go ahead.
takes time.
Yeah,
Takes
no,
time.
I've had conversations with people where I've literally said, "Listen, I am tired of talking about this." Right? There's only so many times we can say, "Hey, let's reset our friendship and start over again." Right? Um and and here's the thing, right? Because we just read the scripture where Jesus gives this figurative number of keep forgiving,
Mm.
right? And it's not, and I think we have to also use wisdom, right? I can keep forgiving someone, but at what point do I realize I'm pretty foolish for putting myself in the same situation to allow this person who clearly doesn't want to change to hurt me and put me through whatever anguish comes with that hurt.
That's what I was saying. Just because you forgive them doesn't mean you allow the things to happen again.
Yes.
Right? We grow from these situations. And just because I forgive you does not mean that our relationship will stay the same.
Yeah.
Just because certain things happen. Like, people change and people grow apart, and that's okay and that's normal. But because I forgive someone for doing a certain thing does not, a lot of times it does, like people say forgive and forget, and like you move on and you forget what happened because you've forgiven them and whatever, and so the cycle kind of repeats.
Mm-hmm.
But I disagree with that statement because I think that although I can forgive and I can move on, I don't think that you should forget about the things that happen, because then you perpetuate the same cycle and then you're in a constant loop of forgiving them, and then you get to 490 and then what happens?
Yeah, I do think like in this the situation I was thinking of, I had told the person, listen, if this topic comes up again, then I don't think we should be friends.
Mm.
Right? Because clearly we can't seem to understand each other if we're gonna keep getting hurt. But like that doesn't make sense to me, right? If we're trying to be close friends and all we can do is hurt each other, there is something deeply flawed in both of us realistically, right? That we keep doing this to each other. So the best thing for both of us is to move forward without being involved in each other's lives, right? Now, did I say it as eloquently as I just did? No. Um, but that was what I meant. I don't think it came across that way. That's a different story. But the reason I bring that up is I remember, okay, like that person, I still talk to them today, right? This conversation was I don't know how long ago at this point. Um, have things happen where it's like they probably had to forgive me of some of the ways I may have spoken to them and vice versa. Yep. Right. But I think we have to have the wisdom from God to know when to walk away from certain situations and when we have to push forward in certain situations.
I think it's not necessarily just the wisdom, but the actual wanting to. Because I can know that I need to leave a certain situation, but until I actually want to for myself. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, so, and I guess for me, that's the difference between knowledge and wisdom,
Mm.
right? Knowledge is knowing I should leave. Wisdom is being able to act on that knowledge, right? So when I say wisdom, it's like, no, to me, wisdom is action,
Okay.
if that makes sense. So if God is giving me the wisdom, hey, it's time to leave, then I have to be willing to act on that godly wisdom and go, all right, I got to put some distance here. But yeah.
Anyway, to wrap this up, um, forgive as God has forgiven you. You know? Go forth.
And forgive.
Amen.
Bye.